If you have decided that raised bed gardens are in your plans for this season, then you are no doubt thinking about what exactly you should fill them with. Well, in today's episode, I'm going to share my favorite mix for finishing off my raised beds. Let's get growing. One of the greatest things about growing a raised bed garden is the complete control it affords you when it comes to the health and structure of your soil. Over the years, I have researched and studied various answers to this question, and I wanted to share with you today what I find great success with. Hi, my name is Zach, and I want to welcome you to KT Outdoors, where we share content that helps you build local, healthy food resources by feeding the soil that feeds your body and your soul, all while saving you and your family money while increasing your food security. Before we dive into this topic, I want you to know that in our last video we talked about ways to fill your raised beds. The mixture I'm about to share isn't for the whole bed. Rather, it's a top dressing for the final 5 to 8 inches. I shared some ideas for filling the lower levels of your bed in the last video, so if you haven't watched that yet, you might go check that out after you watch this one. I'll put a link here and in the description below. Very often, raised bed gardeners, especially if they have a smaller scale garden, will make the choice to fill their beds with some form of bagged product from the local big box stores. Many of them now stock mixes designed specifically for raised bed gardens. While this can work very well and is a fairly easy option to implement, just open the bag and dump it in, right? It just isn't really all that cost effective when you really boil it down, especially when you consider what is actually in those bags. Therefore, I don't generally recommend this option, but for some gardeners, it might be the perfect approach, particularly if you're starting off with just a couple small raised beds. I would be remiss also if I didn't share the fact that my grandparents grew a raised bed garden for years using nothing more than municipal waste compost from the local landfill. Every 5 or 6 years, my grandfather would remove it all and refill his boxes with fresh compost. While I don't recommend this method, it works extremely well for them. So, I can say that I have seen it be successful, and if you're looking for a super easy solution, this might be worth a try. Maybe you'll have the same results they do. Speaking of being successful, if you'd like to help us grow this channel, I could really use your help. I've got a lot of great content planned for this year, so why not consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already, and give this video a quick thumbs up while you're at it. It really helps it get seen by others who might find this information useful. Perhaps the most common approach for raised bed soils comes from a very popular garden concept and its associated book, and that is square foot gardening. Labeled Mel's Mix, if I remember right, it's a very simple solution of 1/3 compost, 1/3 peat moss, and 1/3 vermiculite. I don't think this is a bad option at all. It has been wildly successful for many gardeners over the years, and the components are generally easy to find. The main variable, in my opinion, with this mix is the quality of the compost that you use. In my experience, there is wide variability in the quality and consistency of things labeled and sold as compost. I think a higher quality compost will increase the effectiveness of this approach if you're just going to stick with these 3 ingredients. And I personally generally look at this mix as a good starting point to work from, but we can add more and take this mixture to the next level. So let's analyze what these 3 elements are bringing to the table. First, the compost is obviously the most crucial. It is providing all the fertility, as the other 2 ingredients are added mostly as fillers to increase water holding capacity, as they both do a great job of soaking up and holding water. Peat moss is also having a soil pH effect, as it is generally acidic, so it is lowering the pH to some extent. as I have stated before, especially with high quality compost. This mixture will work, but my main issue with it is not what's in it as much as what isn't. And quick side note for those of you who have done some research on peat moss and the sustainability of that, you can obviously substitute cocoa coir. If you've done some of the research, that would be obvious. If you haven't done the research, then I'll tell you now. You can substitute peat moss with cocoa coir, which is just the shredded up husks of the coconut. It has a very similar effect in soil mixes, so it's a good substitute. It's also debatably more environmentally friendly because it's a waste product from coconut farming or whatever. It does, however, not have the acidifying effect that peat moss does. So just be advised that that is the one main difference between cocoa coir versus peat moss. But in general, you can use them interchangeably. Now, if this base 3 ingredients is all your plants have access to, then one key thing that is missing entirely, depending upon your compost, is rocks. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but rocks are minerals. And for truly healthy plants, there needs to be access to a wide range of nutrients and minerals. Therefore, the very first thing that I add to this base mixture is some sort of a broad spectrum mineral fertilizer. Generally, I use azomite, which is like a kind of rock dust. And another thing that I like to add is kelp meal. Now, these will both provide a whole host of elements and nutrients and minerals and other things that your plants will use to thrive. And it doesn't take much. So don't worry when you see the cost of these things. I might only put like a half a cup of each, if that, in an entire wheelbarrow full of this mixture. So a little goes a long ways. The next thing that I always try to add, if possible, is some worm castings. The nutrients that are in worm casting are, of course, beneficial, but for me, this is really more about adding composting worms to the bed than the actual nutrition from the worm castings. Those worms will help everything that's in the lower layers of the bed break down further and generate even more worm castings, essentially right in place. That's why I choose to use fresh worm castings out of my worm bins versus a store-bought option, because I know that I'm adding viable eggs and potentially a few little worms that may have snuck past my sorting system into the mix. So I'm getting that good inoculation of composting worms to help start processing all of the materials that are in my raised beds. Since I think those worms are a key piece of that soil fertility puzzle, I want to make sure that their needs are met. And one thing that is missing from our mix thus far is some form of sand. Now, for the worms particularly, sand is crucial, as they need it in their craw to help digest the organic material that they feed on. Therefore, I will add a small amount of green sand, which is a type of fertilizer, and or even just simple playground sand, which you can get a nice bag of at your local big box store, and it will last you for the longest time. Trust me, you don't need a lot. So these add even more minerals to your soil mixture and make sure that the worms have what they need to grow and populate the entire bed and use up all of the material that you have spread throughout that bed. After that, I like to add some organic amendments to help boost and sustain the fertility. So here I look for slow release products, and I generally include things like bone meal, blood meal, or maybe an organic slow release fertilizer mixture. Like you can find those mixtures that have a lot of the bone meal, the blood meal, feather meal, and lots of other great ingredients already mixed into them. Cottonseed meal was another one that I just recently saw while doing research for this video, and I did a quick search, and this one is widely sold as an organic fertilizer similar to the blood and the bone meal. So that'd be another thing you could debate adding. It's kind of highish in nitrogen, so I don't think it's worth it. It's certainly something to consider if you have access to it. And then over the course of the growing season, those organic materials will slowly break down and become nutrient available to your plants, so you get this sustained feeding opportunity to keep your beds going all season long. Now, on this note, I want to share an insider tip that I recently learned from the Rusted Gardener channel that sent me down a bit of a wormhole here on YouTube. A lot, and I mean a lot because I went and checked my bags, a lot of organic, slow-release fertilizers include alfalfa as a main component. Okay, without getting into the science of it all, alfalfa is a great fertilizer for your garden, and since it is an animal feed, you can find it at feed stores sold as either alfalfa meal or alfalfa pellets. Now, you can go buy a 10-pound bag of organic fertilizer, and you might pay anywhere from $15 to $20 for a 10-pound bag, like a small, standard, toss it in the shopping cart size bag of organic, slow-release fertilizer mixture, which I love them. I use them. They're good. But I'm pretty sure you could go to a Tractor Supply or some other farm supply store and buy a 50-pound bag of alfalfa pellets for $12 to $15.
Identical.
Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. I will be using alfalfa pellets this season for the first time. Just make sure that it's straight alfalfa pellets. I have rabbit pellets here for the rabbits that we raise, but I know from looking at those labels that rabbit pellets specifically have other things added to them, like salt and various minerals and other nutrients that the rabbits need to stay healthy, because that rabbit pellet is being sold as a complete food with everything that your rabbits need. Well, rabbits can't survive on just alfalfa alone. It's better if they have some other things included, which are in those pellets. So you want to make sure that you're getting a alfalfa pellet that doesn't have anything added to it. Insider tip. You're welcome. I can't wait to see how it works this year. So, there you have it. My mix takes the standard advice of compost, peat moss, and vermiculite and adds in a host of other ingredients to build a more complete soil profile that will provide a good home for soil microorganisms and help your plants thrive all season long. If you follow the tips from my last video for filling the lower levels of your bed, then you can focus the bulk of your investments on the top 5 to 8 inches of soil, where your plants will actually be finding and using most of what they need to survive. So, start planning now and get your resources ready for an epic start to this growing season, because we all know life is better when it's lived outdoors. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.